So, today, what I want to talk about are three important questions that I ask myself whenever I'm working with clients or my own startups on if we're going to join a startup accelerator or at least try and get into one. What are we asking ourselves to make sure it's the right fit? Are we doing a level of evaluation and, self-assessment to make sure we're not just walking into something without really knowing all that it costs, but of course, everything that you can gain from it as well? So let's dive in. So first, a little background. What is an accelerator? So startup accelerators generally follow very similar themes. They're not all exactly the same, but generally speaking, you're going to find them fixed term, which means they're 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, 16 weeks. Again, some are very long and go for longer than a year. Most are in that, 2 to 3 to 4 month window. From there, typically there's a lot of mentors and like a support system around it. Rarely is it just like one or two people that are talking or educating or doing different things. Usually there's a community, both of alumni from the program, mentors from the local city, and then of course, if the program is big enough, you'll get people flying in from all over or zooming in, whatever it might be. Typically, these programs provide a couple different things. Education is going to be, of course, at the top of the list because they're actually like teaching you how to build your business or how to build within your industry or how to build your specific product type. There's a lot of value add that's niche to how do we learn how to start up, and specifically, how do we learn how to our startup? Because every startup very much is its own beast. Mentorship, not too surprising. If you're going to have mentors around the program, you're going to have people that are there to kind of give you some guidance, and very often capital. Now, capital's very much hit or miss in the sense that, of course, a lot of like the very big ones that have lots of funding behind them will give you capital, but it's not the only thing that matters. And it's definitely not the only reason to join or not to join an accelerator, meaning there are great accelerators that don't offer capital, and there are also horrible accelerators that offer tons of capital, but the deal is really bad, or there's no support, or there's all these other issues that, yeah, you got a couple $100K, but once you spend it, you're going to be really upset that you spent it, especially if you really weren't desperate for the money. A lot of people think they're more desperate for capital than they actually are. Some really are, but most aren't, I find. And typically, all of this is provided in exchange for equity, meaning they get a piece of your business, whether it's 1%, 3%, 6%. Some can be on the higher ends, depending on how involved they are, 6% plus. But generally speaking, it's a small but meaningful chunk because, of course, they're trying to teach you and help you so that way you grow and succeed and scale, and then you exit, and then they make lots of money, and you make way more money, and everybody's happy. Some even cost money. This isn't all of them. Some, it's a really strict application process where if you get in, it's kind of all expenses paid, or at least you're given funding to support your efforts. So they're paying you in that way. But some actually cost money, and some cost money because they have instructors, or it's a more national thing, or there's more infrastructure built out. It really does depend, but generally speaking, I always encourage people to look at the costs, whether it's equity or cash, and then of course determine, are you getting at least what you're paying for, if not more than what you're paying for? To note, accelerators can be a huge advantage for startups, but it really is a question of, is this a good fit? Is what they're offering you actually helpful? Is it what you need right now? Is it worth what you're giving up? If you need 50K, but the cost is going to be 10% of your business, it's pretty hard to say yes to that, even if you really, quote unquote, need the money, because the cost is really high and the amount of money isn't that high. So it's kind of, again, you have to make these little trade-offs. Perfect. What is this accelerator offering you? You have to get specific here. And these are like the four big pillars that I evaluate on. One, what education? Is it structured? Is it just a mentor comes in and speaks and shares life experience? Am I being given handouts and guides? Or is it just kind of we're going to talk to you for an hour and hope you learn something, and that's, this week's lesson? Ideally, it should be specific and it should be actionable. Actionable is very easy to kind of tell if you got it or not. It's when you finish the meeting, Do you have homework that you know, the next steps to do? Do you walk away going, okay, based off that, I need to go have these three conversations. I need to go send these two emails. I need to tell our lawyer this. Like, do you walk away with things to do? Or do you walk away just going, oh, that was cool. Like, that was interesting, or that was inspirational. It's like, a little bit of that is good, and always good to sprinkle in some fireside, coffee chats and whatnot. But if there's not real hardcore education behind it, what are you doing it for, right? Fundamentally. Next is network. Network is a combination of how much network there is, meaning are there enough people that are there to, speak with and engage with. It doesn't mean that there have to be 500. It also doesn't mean there have to be 500 people that are specific to your niche. You can often meet a lot of really interesting, high-powered, well-connected mentors or network people in the network, that want to connect, because these accelerators, right, they have lots of connections. They have lots of biz dev relationships, whether it's people that are from the program or people that have partnered from the program or sponsored it. So the ability for the actual accelerator itself or the community within to make introductions and give you a network that means something, that actually, again, enables another step in your startup, super value add. Next is going to be mentorship. Mentorship, not too surprising. It's all about, again, you have these people around you. Network is kind of the people you can access from a professional perspective in particular. Mentorship is about the people that are around to give you guidance, to give you support, to encourage you. Again, mentorship takes a lot of different levels, and different mentors can provide, one or many things. But fundamentally, mentorship's a little bit more about support, where network is more about business exchange. It's about negotiations. It's about trying to, again, execute on something. And last but not least, capital. Capital, it's a combination of how much capital are they giving you, when, right? Because if they give you 50K, or if they say they're going to give you 500K and they only give you 50K every month, it's like, okay, well, that's fine, maybe, but maybe that's really horrible for your business. Or maybe they're going to give you half of it up front, and then you have to wait another year to get the other half. But what you really need for the current raise is all the money up front. Again, I'm just working on a base assumption here, but this is one of those things where if you don't read the fine print on how much money you're getting, when you're getting it, what you have to do to unlock it, and again, last but not least, what the terms are, what it's going to cost you, is it X percent today? Is the percentage really small? Like, oh, we only want 3 or 4%, but it's non-dilutive, which means as the company evolves, that 4%, which in theory, just like everybody else's, should shrink to 3.9, 3.8, 3.7, whatever it is, as you issue more equity, it doesn't. And obviously, if you're an investor, if you're the next person coming in, it's not as exciting if you know someone isn't going to get diluted and you, the investor, are. So you can see how it could be a great deal. It could be $1 million for 5% of the company, and it just seems like the best thing on the planet. But these little nuances, these little clauses, they really mess things up. Or at least if you don't look for them, you don't have the ability to think through trade-offs and make decisions. There's rarely a clean startup, meaning one without any friction, any complexities, any background work they had to kind of work through to get where they are today. But assuming that away, or assuming you work through that, it's a question of what's the quality of the decisions that you're going to be making from here going forward. And looking at capital and evaluating the cost of capital is a big one. The big question I asked is this what I need to progress? The earlier I am in a startup, the more likely I am going to look for an accelerator. The reason is accelerators have so many resources and education. It's really a good place, again, if you find a good accelerator, one that's worth its cost, to put it bluntly, you can get a lot of value out of them if you know how to use them. It's like a rich mine. And if you're a good miner, right, if you're really handy with the pickaxe, you can walk out in a couple hours and have tons of value. That being said, the mine could be incredibly rich. And if you're a poor miner, right, and you don't understand it, or you're very inexperienced, or you're not willing to learn, the richest, most ore-rich mine in the world will mean nothing to you because you don't know how to extract value from it. So here are some easy ways that I like to look at the value, especially at the early stage. So this applies to many of my clients and mentees. So these are idea stage first-time founders. These are people that are looking to build a business for the first time. Maybe there's someone in their 20s that had an idea while they were in college. Maybe it's a professional that used to work at X, Y, and Z type of facility, and now they had this idea that will help the business that they work in do X, Y, and Z. It's like, great. It doesn't matter where they're coming from, but if they're a first timer and so they're missing a lot of context for the industry, for example, if you're a first time founder and I say the words 83B to you, that probably doesn't mean anything. If you're a first time founder or you're later in the first time founder game, or you're a second time or third time founder and I say 83B, you know exactly what that means because you don't like to pay too much on your taxes. This is one of those niche things where often these little tools or tidbits or informational nuggets, they're so buried in this subculture, right? Because you've got small businesses, and then within small businesses, you've got traditional small businesses, and then you've got startups. Well, they both have their own nomenclature, right? Startups aren't going to banks every day. Small businesses aren't going to venture capital firms every day. Startups care about 83Bs. Small businesses rarely do, again, depending on the circumstance. So this is a perfect example of so much context, so much terminology, so much value is around that if you're a first time founder, accelerators can kind of really plunge you into that pool. And it's the old drink through a fire hose, right? You're going to learn a lot and just keep on absorbing. Next, they're going to be post-product founders, people that are really either working on an MVP, like actively developing it, improving it, or they have one. Because accelerators, as I mentioned before on the networking piece, they have tons of connections. They have tons of validity. They have tons of kind of broader community support. So if you have a product, especially one that's already working, and you're in an accelerator that's relevant to your business model, to your industry, to your geography, what have you, the odds of you being able to lean in and capitalize on that and go, hey, can you make some intros? Can we get some real feedback? You know, whatever the negotiation may be, it's a big value add, right? Especially if you're, again, you don't necessarily have to be a first time founder, but if you have that early product and you're really trying to get that first wave of customers using an accelerator, using the network within, it's not, let's say, the most optimal way. Like I wouldn't go to an accelerator for customers, but it would definitely be a huge sweetener and something I would really be excited about if I knew I was going to join the accelerator or I was considering it anyway. Really important note, cash and brand are very often big distractions. What does that mean? It means that just because the check's $500K doesn't mean it's worth the cost. And just because it says Techstars or Y Combinator or what have you doesn't mean it's the right fit for you. Doesn't mean it's bad. These people have conquered and built these amazing companies and do all this stuff. But just because it's right for those companies doesn't mean it's right for you. Just because you don't get into that accelerator doesn't mean that you're a failure as a company. It really is a question of, do only smart people go to Harvard? And Harvard's the only place that has smart people. That's the same logic as, oh, I have to get into this accelerator, or I have to raise millions of dollars of early VC money to win. It's like, oh, is that a written rule in the universe that I just wasn't made aware of and millions of other founders out there weren't made aware of, that you have to do these things? It's like, no, you have to pay attention to the situation before you that's relevant to your specific business. And that all comes to, okay, what can this accelerator do for you today? And what can those actions and, impacts today lead to tomorrow? Really important thing to remember. You can have all the cash in the world, but if you do not have the skills to execute on it, it is worthless. I know really theoretically successful and very competent people that waste millions and millions of dollars on things that led to nothing, and will continue to lead to nothing if they continue to invest the way they do. It's all about skills. It's better to be someone with tons of skills and no money than someone with a lot of money and no skills, because you're just going to waste all the money and then be in a really horrible position. If you're someone with skills, you can be scrappy, get momentum, and then get money to accelerate all of your activity and all of your success. That's a good place to be. How much does the accelerator cost? You've heard me mention cost a ton, and it's because, well, you're building a startup and I'm a finance guy. You have to think about things in terms of cost because every action is one. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to spend money to have a cost. If it's taking your time, if it's taking your energy, if it's taking your attention, if it's taking any of these things, that's a cost because you could be applying any and all of those things to something else, another task, another effort, another accelerator. So we want to make sure that when we look at these things, again, everything's a cost, not just the dollars. So thinking it through can really be helpful in your journey. First costs, time and energy. Too much busy work versus action. There are some startups and there are some founders that really benefit from a lot of the early busy work that accelerators will sometimes give you. It doesn't mean that you have to do every single thing. Some are very much required, and some accelerators tend to flood you with this type of work because they know that founders have very little exposure. But I find that it's really a balance. If you look at their work and you look at what the program's offering, and when you talk to the people that are going to be teaching you or as you're getting interviewed, if it's 10 hours, 15 hours, 20 hours of non-action focused work per week, that's a problem. An example would be writing your vision for 5 hours or 10 hours isn't that helpful. Sitting there and spending 3 hours writing out all the leads that you can think of to go do customer interviews with, super helpful. So this is one of those, of course, in the early days, you want to have a brand and you want to have this and you want to do these exercises to make sure, you're building the Rubik's Cube that is your business. But you also want to make sure that in the early days, you're not getting so caught up in homework that you're not actually doing work, right? Like you can do all your homework and then make no money. It's like, that doesn't help you, right? You can do all your homework and then not progress the business or not get closer to capital. That also doesn't help you. So you want to make sure if they're giving me work and if they're giving me a lot of homework, is it something that leads to value? For example, as I said, if they're having you write out your lead list and they're helping you think through how to engage these people and what questions to ask, amazing, super valuable. If they're having you write your mission statement for 3 hours and present on very theoretical, non-hyper product or customer or legal, just the true nuts and bolts of building a business, if they're not dialing you in there, I run, because you don't have time. You have to hurry. You have to get stuff done. Doesn't mean you have to sprint and work so quick that you move fast and break things, but there's so much work to be done. And you need to get to it, and just sitting around doing a bunch of busy work, I do not find helpful. Next is money. Expensive on the cash or equity front. Very simple. If it costs hundreds or thousands of dollars to join an accelerator, again, if you have the money, by all means, but be very careful what they're claiming. There have been very famous stories of accelerators that have made huge, giant promises, and then they end up collapsing because the promises were, in fact, too good to be true. This isn't surprising when you know the industry, but it can be very surprising when you're a founder and you go, this program says they're going to do X, Y, and Z. I'm going to get these investor intros and I'm going to get this and I'm going to get that. It's only $4,000. It's like, okay, well, $4,000 to get started. Like, you could be putting $4,000 towards your product, right? A couple $100, maybe even in the low thousands, depending on the volume of education and what you're really getting and how many instructors and all these things. But if it's just raw money and it feels more like a bill than it does like something you're earning and getting access to, that's a problem, right? That's a little yellow flag that I definitely would pay attention to. Some common offerings and the checks against them. So things that are worth thinking about as you go through. Education. Is it quality and is it actionable? Meaning, am I learning good stuff, or is it just very fluffy, theories and things that don't really help me day to day? And actionable, can I walk away with to-dos? Can I walk away with homework that helps move the business forward? Network. Is the network accessible? Because if you can't get to them, useless. Appropriate, meaning if you're a B2B person and the network's all people that are big in the B2C space, that's not going to help you. And quality, meaning depending on not just like personality, like you want someone that's like nice and friendly, but more than that, is the network full of people that are incredibly junior, Or is the network full of people that are, mid-level to senior, people that can actually make intros in a company, or people whose opinions and feelings and thoughts on a business or an industry carry more weight? It doesn't mean that everybody has to be the CEO of a $100 million business to be valuable, but it means that person should have some position of authority that they're able to speak from, so that way you can actually get value out of it. Mentorship, active and experienced. If your mentors feel lazy or they feel like they don't really want to talk to you, it's a bad sign, right? Mentors should be excited, and you should feel that they want you to win. You should feel that they're pushing you. You should feel a positive sense from them. And if you don't, it's a pretty good sign that there's going to be some rough times ahead. And experience means nobody wants to learn from the person that just learned from the book, right? Have you actually built companies? Have you actually sold companies? Have you contributed meaningfully in your role? It doesn't mean that you have to have sold $1 billion business to be relevant, but if I asked you and you say you're a marketing mentor, can you talk through different campaigns that you've run? Can you talk through successes and failures? Can you talk through things that these founders would really want to know that will make their journey easier to get where you are, which we assume is somewhere successful? We have to ask these questions because it's not readily apparent that every mentor is experienced and every mentor is active with the right, again, engagement. This is something that it requires social skills, and a little bit is, hey, can I talk to a mentor? What types of mentors do you have? What's been other founders' experience? This is why it's really helpful when you're getting into the accelerator land. If you can talk to founders that have gone through the accelerator and do a little informational interview, that can be really powerful in terms of collecting a lot of this information. And last, capital. Is it fair? Meaning, are they actually giving it to you at the right time, at the right place, with the right terms? No weird anti-dilution this or problems or caveats or little things buried in the agreement that screw you over 3 years from now. And let's assume they're giving it to you. They're giving you the cash in exchange for equity. Is the equity percent appropriate? If they're taking more than 6, 7%, 8, 9% of the business, again, you got to be providing a ton of value to be getting more from me. 5, 6, 7%. Again, I try to go by role and by this. So remember, I'm not pricing a person. I'll give a developer 30, 40, 50%, depending on what they're doing. I'm pricing an accelerator, right? Something that the equity is going to an entity. It's not going to a person. So there's not like one person that owns this 6% that's going to champion me. It goes into this pool, and it's up to me to make sure that I extract enough value out of it to make sure that 6% was worth it. This is, again, you have to do a little bit of mental math when you're trying to negotiate this. Common question here is big versus small. The large ones, the Y Combinators, the Techstars, the Alchemists of the world, they're going to have, of course, a lot of brand and a lot of money. And a lot of them are very, very good. Again, for the right startup. And the question is that you? And then beyond that, do you even get in? Lots of people it would be perfect for, but they only have X amount of slots. So you have to understand there's always going to be a churn anyway. Small may have little to no cash, but remember, if you're a small accelerator, owning an accelerator, building an accelerator, trust me, is a very difficult enterprise. So people that are doing it, I promise you, as long as they're not charging, an arm and a leg, they're doing it for love of the game. Like, they actually want to help founders, they want to build. And as long as they pass the smell test of, is the education good? Do they have a little network? How's the mentors? Do they give you any capital? Maybe, maybe not. But if they don't give you any capital, they probably shouldn't take any equity, again, depending on their arrangement. But maybe it costs a couple $100. It's like, if I had to trade a couple $100, but I got tons of valuable education, network, and mentorship, that's worth it for me. Even if I come out neutral, the chances of me losing money, especially if I've done a little bit of diligence, you're telling me I'm not going to learn one thing or a few things or meet one or a few people that are materially valuable to me. I just don't believe it if you're using the accelerator properly. Last but not least, can I commit to the accelerator program? Now, you've heard me give little nods to this on the previous two, questions, but the one I want you to think of here is, are you in a position to go all in on the program? And all in means different things to different people. This does not mean you're spending 100 hours a week on it. It doesn't mean you're spending 5. It doesn't mean you're spending 50. It means that, are you in a position to give this as much attention as you reasonably can? And in an ideal world, if you have team members, you have some little supports that can help you along the way and help pick up some of the slack where you eventually, get busy. If you're not really going to try and learn, versus just be in the room while they're teaching, that's a bad sign. If you're not going to try and really lean into the network, you're just going to, again, be there and not really try and meet people or connect or try and build good business relationships. Is that really worth the cost, right? You have to evaluate these different things, because if you don't go all in on them, how are you going to expect to get full value out of them? The worst case scenario is a startup accelerator that could give you $1 million of value in exchange for 3% of your equity. You get $100,000 of value from, because you didn't actually do anything with it. You didn't lean in. You didn't meet the people. You didn't get the connections. You didn't meet that one client that gave you that one testimonial that unlocked 3 other relationships. Like, you just didn't go in the pool. And now you can't swim. And it's like, well, you should have gone in the pool. There was a chance to swim. There was a chance to learn. And now you're stuck outside it. And guess what? You still have to pay the entrance fee to go to the pool. It's a bad situation if you try to do this and you only, again, are able to commit a little bit. My experience is 2 to 3 months is typically the norm as far as lengths go. And there's going to be weekly meetings that are scheduled. And there's also going to be little ad hoc meetings. Ad hoc meetings can be impromptu stuff. It can be firesides. It can be meetings with mentors, meeting with networks, little social gatherings, be they virtual or in person. There's some time commitment, but again, you're not there for charity. You're there to learn, to build, to make a startup. So when there's a lot of time commitment, it's like there's a lot of time that I can extract value from this. I mean, the alternative is, oh, we only meet once a week for an hour, so I'm spending all this money and I'm giving all this equity and I'm doing all this stuff, but I'm spending no time with the educators and the group and the network. Like, how am I supposed to get value if I don't have time? Right? There's a certain part of, like, there's almost no pleasing people because it's either way too busy or way too little. Try and do as much as you can. That's the truth of it. Remember, this is not about checking a box. This is about maximizing learning and maximizing value. That way you can progress your business. Important to remember, startups are not automatic. It is the most manual thing in the world to build something scalable, because you have to think about every little piece, and you're trying to build a successful business and one that makes more money than most businesses do in 1/10 the time really quickly. Like, you have a very difficult task before you. So to expect that, again, it's going to be easy or you only have to learn a few more things, it's like the learning is consistent and ongoing. The building is consistent and ongoing. The mistakes are consistent and ongoing. But so is the progress. But it's about, again, you're going to mistake. And can you keep learning, learn one more time, then you make a mistake, and therefore keep the business going forward. A good mindset that I try to have, because startups are a lot like, again, to use the analogy from earlier, they're a lot like being like a coal miner. When you go down there, there's a lot of work mining that leads to nothing, because you're just moving rocks out of the way. But there's a point in the middle of all that mining where you see something shiny. Again, in this example, you find the diamond right in the coal mine or in the diamond mine. It's like you had to do all the excavating, digging. You had to move all that just dirt, that useless dirt out of the way to get to the diamond. Very often in startup land, whether it's the product you're building, the customers you're talking to, the accelerator you're in, the homework you're doing, the website you're editing, the list goes on. It's not the, again, 80-20 rule. It's not it's not all the work that you're doing, that full 100 hours that matters. You have to do that 100 hours, because the 10 hours that do matter, where you get the diamond, they come at the end, or they come interspersed between. Really, really good, smart, experienced founders, they can go straight to the diamond. So that's why they skip all the BS work. But if you're a first-time founder and you don't know what you're doing, fair enough, who does? You don't know what's good work or what's bad work. Therefore, the mindset I try to employ is, I am willing to do the work that leads to nothing, because that same work will be what leads to everything. I'm still doing the same mining. I'm swinging the same pickaxe. I'm talking to the same customers. I'm talking to the same network group from the accelerator. I'm trying to get the same X, Y, and Z done. But those first few strikes, they fail. And then eventually the future ones don't. So when I look at this accelerator and all the time commitment, it's not that every hour is going to be valuable. It's a question of, are you willing to put in all the non-valuable hours to get to the hours that matter? And that's what we got. So hopefully these kind of major questions will help you better understand how to evaluate an accelerator, and at least the process that I go through and my clients and my companies go through. I think it's a good way to evaluate, because just like anything else, not all startups are created equal. Not all startup accelerators are created equal. And you have to find the right match for you and your work and your specific situation. So thanks for watching, and we'll get some new videos coming out soon, and I'll see you next time.